Hello guys, it's me, Greed here, and today I need to talk about something specific with this handsome devil. So, Spilo actually really likes the Anchor Bolt's major perk from Torbjorn, the one that lets him throw the turret up on the walls and the ceilings and stuff. I don't like it. Now, also, I don't really like perks in general, but I especially don't like this one for a couple of reasons, and I will explain why. Firstly, when you actually get this perk, it's its major perk, so you get it a little bit deeper into the game, which adds more inconsistency to the perk because the way it operates is obviously going to be different. For example, for the first half of the game, it's not going to be like that, and for the second half of the game, it is going to be like that. I don't really like that inconsistency, first of all. I know that's not a big deal to some people, but I treat Overwatch as a competitive game, and in a competitive game, I like things to be consistent. So that's obviously my first point. Many people are going to disagree with that. That's absolutely fine. My next point, though, is that with Torbjorn's turret, even though there are scenarios where he may put it really far back and on the ground, and that may be inaccessible to most characters that don't have some kind of range, there is still a world where those characters could technically close the distance on the turret and break it if they absolutely had to. Even though it may be extremely suboptimal, it would still be possible for it to be achieved. However, with Torbjorn's Anchor Bolts perk, where he can put it up on walls and ceilings, there are some heroes that quite literally just cannot access the turret. One of them would be a character like Tracer, for example, where if you were to look at like Busan Mecha Base or something, you can throw it up on top of the ceiling there. That's so high up that Tracer cannot really break that turret. The turret would kill her way before she had the ability to break it. And in the scenario where her team might be breaking it too slowly or something, it may make it so the character is forced to swap off, which kind of makes it that the counter picking is stronger, especially because it's a major perk where it's going to happen later on in the game, where the Tracer is more likely to have her major perk and so on. So it may be making it so that the Tracer has to swap off later on into the game, which again is going to affect her more because she's going to have to swap to a character with no perks and then work her way through the perks again. So I just think it adds a little bit too much counterpicking to a character like Tracer, who can't really access the turret when it's on the walls or the ceilings, and I think that is a big deal. I think that's a good reason as to not allow it. Now, I do agree, it's a cool design, right? Being able to put it on the walls and the ceiling stuff is cool. That's objectively cool, and it adds more dynamic gameplay to Torb. It adds new angles for him to use his turret at, and I do think that is interesting and cool for the game. But I just have to think about it from the perspective of the characters that may not so easily be able to access the turret. So another example of this would be a character like Reinhardt. Now, obviously, a Torb turret has 225 HP, and a Fire Strike does 120. So technically speaking, a Reinhardt can break a Torb turret, assuming he needs to. But the cooldown trade isn't worth it, obviously. 2 Fire Strikes is way more valuable into the enemy team for building ult charge or potentially killing someone than it is breaking a Torb turret. However, you technically can still break the Torb turret as of Reinhardt. Therefore, I don't think this actually affects Ryan that badly. Now, obviously, spending 2 Fire Strikes is a big deal, but assuming the Torb turret is a big enough deal to commit those Fire Strikes, it technically could be worth it in some scenario. So, for example, on a hero like Ryan, I think at least he has some kind of ability to break it, even though it may seem like a hero that couldn't. Therefore, I think in the scenario where you're playing Reinhardt, playing the Anchor Bolt's Torb perk against you as a Ryan actually isn't the end of the world. You don't have to swap, which I think if you're going to keep the perks in the game, and especially this perk in the game, which I both dislike, I think that would be at least some ground, where at least he can do something. Another example would be Winston, except this one is quite a bit worse. Winston obviously has no actual range in his kit at all, apart from his generic right-click thing. Now, I don't even know why he has the right-click. Maybe it's a 5v5 change. I don't even like the right-click, and most people don't even use it, and when they do use it, they don't use it correctly. So this might be the only application where people need to use the right-click. So, if you had to guess how long it takes for a Winston to right-click a Torb turret to death, you would probably guess, like, probably just under 6.5 seconds, like 6.2 seconds or something. Wow, bang on, that's incredible, you win $1 million. That's exactly how long it takes. It's 6.2 seconds of standing there, right-clicking a Torb turret until it breaks when it's up on the roof. That is aggressive. That's a little bit aggressive for how long that takes. However, you can't really buff Winston's right-click damage because it's already something you shouldn't have. It's already too much poke. It's already a lot of damage, but it's just not a lot of damage in the scenario where you're breaking a Torb turret, because the value of breaking the Torb turret, it doesn't give you enough, considering the fact that of how long you need to dedicate to break it in the first place. So Winston is another character where there is really no valuable trade he can do to break a Torb turret that's using anchor bolts to be on the ceiling or a really high up wall where he can't zap it. And that, again, is another issue with the perk, where if you're on Winston, technically you have the option of right-clicking it down for 6.2 seconds and winning, but unlike in the case with Reinhardt, where you can quickly just throw 2 fire streaks at it and be done with it, Winston has to dedicate 6 and a bit seconds to breaking that Torb turret. That's a full jump cycle of doing nothing but breaking a Torb turret. And that Torb turret could be chipping you down. It could be the thing that's breaking your armor off of you and making it so you're taking more damage in your dive sometimes. It just could be the thing that's locking your Tracer down, and your Tracer can't deal with it either, and no one else in your team wants to deal with it. And it feels bad to play against when you're on those heroes that are not capable of outputting that longer range damage onto it. Another example would be Brig, right? How is Brig breaking that Torb turret? Now, obviously, people are going to be saying Brig could never break a Torb turret in the first place. And I agree with you. Brig really couldn't ever do that. You would never be in a scenario where you were running off to break a Torb turret. And even when you were doing it, it took ages, right? But at least in the scenarios where Brig had to do that, it was physically possible, because there were some games, especially if you were a lower ranked player, where some people just don't break the Torb turret, and some people just place the Torb turret in such a bad spot that you could maybe sometimes run up to it as Brig and break it if you absolutely had to, and it was killing your team. At least there was a play that could be made that was valuable, right? Whereas now, with the Anchor Bolts perk, it's kind of deleted your ability to do that on that hero. And I know I've said it a lot of times already in this video, but my main point is that I don't like that there are heroes or things in the game that make you swap or adapt, not necessarily adapt your playstyle, that's fine, but adapt to a thing that I find uninteresting, right? And a good example of adaptation that is interesting would be like a Zarya bubble. I like adapting my play around the Zarya bubble. Oh, I'm going to deliberately shoot this guy so he might get a bubble. Oh, he's got a bubble. Okay, now I'm going to run off on a different angle and shoot a different guy, knowing that he isn't going to get a bubble this time, right? That's a fun adaptation of play because there is a good resource trade, right? It's fun to be able to force that cooldown out of the Zarya because it's the Zarya's aggression tool or it's her defensive tool. And using it defensively can a lot of the times be worse than obviously using it proactively and aggressively. Therefore, you get big value. It's fun and valuable to try to force out that Torb turret, right? Or I mean the Zarya bubble. And I would find that to be interesting adaptation of play. Uninteresting adaptation of play is, oh, they've got a Torb turret 75 feet up on a wall. Okay, I guess I'm going to have to swap to Ramatra instead of Winston so I can staff it out of the wall. And then every, like 12 seconds or whatever it is, I don't know how long the cooldown is, you have to re-look up at the ceiling and break it again. I don't know. It's just, I don't find it to be an interesting gameplay loop against the Anchor Bolts. However, there are some things, like I said, the Zarya bubble, that will force you to adapt your play that are interesting. Another unfun adaptation of play would be something like a Widowmaker, where you're playing the game, you're brawling, you're having fun, you're being aggressive, you're doing whatever you're doing, and then all of a sudden, there's a Widowmaker at the back of the map. Now, can you just run out in the open and kill her team while it's a Widowmaker? Yeah, she misses every shot, but that's obviously not a way to play the game. So you're going to have to fall under the new umbrella of ideas where it's, well, I can't peek the Widow, so I'm just going to stand in cover all day until my Winston jumps on her or something, or my Genji dives her, or I don't know, or someone chips her or whatever. But it's that boring adaptation of play. We don't really feel like it's up to you. You don't feel like it's you versus them in that moment. It's just a kind of like, you versus a universal constant of the fact that you will simply lose to this thing unless you conform. Do you know what I mean? There's no playing around it. There's no like outplaying it. It's just, this is a reality that you must deal with in this way. And again, I find that boring, and I would equate that to be the Anchor Bolts perk. For Torb, I would consider those to be not exactly the same, but similar. And that's why I don't like the Anchor Bolts perk for Torb. A couple of reasons why. I love you all. Everyone here, I love you all. I hope you have a good day. Praise be. Have a good one. Mwah. Goodbye. Goodbye. Enjoy a day with your family. Mwah. Goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye.